the thing is that when it comes to impact data, we're living in an extremely exciting time. I guess I'm not exaggerating too much if I say that just 10 years ago, impact data wasn't really even a thing. Impact data was maybe something that some small groups in companies were talking about, some really forerunner researchers and academics were looking into. But when it comes to companies, executive teams and boards, this wasn't the number one thing that decisions were made on. And that's changing. Just in the beginning of this year, EU launched its new regulations, the Sustainable Finance Regulations, which, to put a very, very complex set of things shortly, basically makes it mandatory for both investors and companies to start to disclose certain types of data points about their impact and sustainability. And on top of that, as we will hear later today, the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation is about to launch new standards, which essentially make impact data something that companies need to report on a regular basis, basically quarterly, at the same time as they report their financial data as well. Now, this might sound like a lot of boring things, regulation and standards, but this is actually a pretty huge deal. Because as soon as data becomes something that you need to report on and is put on the tables of executive teams and boards, it is bound to impact things that matter. And it is bound to get also those people acting that wouldn't really care that much about sustainability otherwise, because it's about to change things like executive KPIs and even compensation programs and incentive schemes. So this is really a big deal. I'm not sure if I'm the only one in the room today who could say that this is a bit of a dream come true for me. When I decided 5 years ago to start this company and started to explore whether this actually should be a company or an academic project or what, one of my dreams was, and the very clear aim was, that I want impact data to be treated with the same kind of scientific and mathematical rigor that we are used to treating financial data. And these developments really are slowly making it a reality. So things are great, right? But where to actually get the data? As an engineer, I am somewhat excited about the policies, but even more excited about the question that, okay, great, now this is required. But where does the data come from? Who actually knows what is the impact of companies? And what needs to happen in order for humanity to create this information? We have some bits and pieces here and there. We can buy a carton of oat milk in the grocery store and read that some claims by the company itself about its sustainability and impact. And we can hear a lot of marketing slogans. We can read companies' own reports as well. But what do we really know about the impact of data? This is the question we as Upright are really dedicated to. And as everybody in the audience probably knows by now, we've been building a pretty huge piece of a quantification model, a piece of IP that is trying to address this question in the past couple of years. So the first thought of where to get this data, at least for me, I don't know about you guys, but for me it's, well, the companies themselves. Who would have better data than the companies themselves? Because they are like closest to the impacts at least when you just think about internal impact, stuff that happens inside the company. Great, this was my first idea as well, 5 years ago. However, in the past 4 years in the Upright team, we have learned that unfortunately this thing is not that easily solved. And we have started to call this phenomenon the paradox of real data. This is what happens when you see numbers with a lot of digits, just a lot of numbers. And it kind of looks right, but it doesn't necessarily answer the MVP question and doesn't really help investors, for example, decide what they should invest in, or help talented young people decide where they should work, or help policymakers make better policies. So what is the paradox of real data? What am I talking about? Let's look at some concrete disclosures that are available for companies. This is now a report by a company called Campbell's Soup Company, a US-based firm that is mostly known for their canned soup. I guess everybody knows the example, that's why I brought it here. They're a great company, 8 billion of revenue, been around for quite some time. And they are excellently good citizens. They do a responsibility and sustainability report. This is their report of 2020. So I guess for a lot of you, this looks like real data. There's column, there's rows, there's fiscal years. I guess this is data. It talks a lot about their very important sounding things like emissions, water use, and waste. Good. This is what we thought as well, and we've been playing with data like this quite a bit. We get asked on a regular basis, okay, great, you're building a model, so you're estimating these numbers, but do you also compare it to real data? And this is music to my ears. Anyone who's ever been playing with machine learning knows that if somebody has real data, that is amazing, because that can be used to teach a machine to make more real data. Unfortunately, this real data is not quite what it's said to be. Something that might catch your attention in this page, at least mine, I typically look at the biggest number. So there's scope 3, this number right here, is the biggest number, and it looks pretty big, but it should be big, right? Scope 3, for those of you who are not in the emission measuring lingo yet, there's scope 1, 2, and 3. 3 is the biggest, takes the most things into account. But as a sort of data-driven engineer, or even a data-driven consumer or a violinist, you might first want to make a sanity check that what is this number really about? That's what we did as well at Upright, of course, being the nerds that we are. So one data point that this could be then mirrored against is what is the total number of human-made, so anthropogenic CO2 equivalent emissions? So just to put this number in perspective, the IPCC's latest estimate on this for the same year that Campbell Soup is here reporting on, so 2019, is 59 gigatons. Okay. And Campbell Soup is here saying their scope 3 is 5 gigatons. So only their scope 3 is a whopping 8% of the global emissions. Really? This is a fun example for me, because typically people think that when companies measure their emission, they downplay everything. They can also upplay it quite a bit. They learned later on, they fixed it now. This is a disclaimer, they fixed it now. It's off by 1000x. Whoops, that happens. But the thing is, nobody notices because nobody knows what these numbers should look like. Key message that we want to make here is that just the company disclosures themselves are not enough to fix the problem. If the problem is that we need better information based on which investors, consumers, employees, the public sector, business managers can make smarter and more fact-based decisions. Okay, so we need something more than the company disclosures themselves. What do we need then? There's a lot of great projects on CO2 emissions, and this is really important that they have emerged. This is a really, really good thing that humanity is putting more and more smart brains on emission calculation. So let's now assume for a while that the emission calculation projects are now really good, perfect, good enough, that they are actually producing good numbers about emissions. What we've learned in the past couple of years is that this is not enough either. And here's why. So let's say that we are looking at two companies, Company A and Company B. A bit different in terms of how their offices look like, at least on this page. Let's say that there are now two companies whose CO2 equivalent emissions are exactly the same. So both of them, the emission number is X tons. And this is now information you get as, for example, an investor or a business executive or a consumer or employee. Great. But for one of these companies, the product is a sugar-sweetened soft drink that is mainly sold for kids and teenagers. Let's say it has a nice cartoon on it. And the other other company's product is a type 2 diabetes treatment program and maybe some gadgets and software to solve type 2 diabetes for teenagers and kids. So one of the companies is essentially creating a problem that we, even if you're only interested in dollars and euros, is costly for the society, and another one is then solving the same problem. So just knowing the CO2 emissions alone does not help us understand yet which company we should invest in, which company we should support with our actions. We need to understand what that company actually gets done with the resource on the plus side. And for that, the emission calculations are not enough. Okay, a lot of things that are not enough. What is enough then? We have come to the strong conclusion that what we need are science-based, so not just marketing-based or individual bottom-up analysis-based, comparable figures on what we call the net impact, so both the pluses and the minuses that a company causes in the surrounding world. Our approach for this, as maybe many of you know, as already finding your ways to the event, is to build something that we call net impact profiles. Two things you need to understand about a net impact profile for a company. What is the requirements for a minimum viable product to actually address the question of a net impact? You look at both the negatives and the positives at the same time, because just looking at the negatives does not yet tell you where the resource is used. And the other important thing is that you look at the entire value creation spectrum of a company at once. This means looking at, for example, here we structure them as society, knowledge, health, and environment. You might structure them as you like, but you need to cover all the significant ways in which a company impacts the world around them. Otherwise, you end up with sub-optimizing categories and not really understanding what is being done with the resources and what is maybe happening in some other impact categories. Cool. So now I would love to immerse myself into a 3-hour lecture of the upright net impact model. But because I know that many of you, or most of you, are here today to celebrate the fact that impact data is getting more transparent and maybe to see the new platform as well, I'm going to keep this short. And I've made myself a challenge to cover the methodology and how the model actually works in the next 4 minutes. Let's see how I can do. So to just summarize the upright model and what we concretely do in 4, I would like to say simple chunks of IP, but let's be more realistic, 4 pretty complex pieces of work. The first one of them that we started to do with the upright team 5 years ago is to build a huge simulation of the global private sector. And this is really important to understand the data going forward that we're just about to look at very soon. So basically what we have built is a graph, a mathematical graph that consists of all the products and services that can be traded in the global markets. It's not just a list, but it's a graph with interconnections. So it knows the value chain links between products. It knows what we call product family relations, which allows us to generalize and specialize knowledge inside the chain. And it also understands what products are big in terms of money. So basically the market size estimates of each of the nodes in the graph. This particular piece of IP is what also has led us to come to one of the main conclusions of our work so far. Why do we need to do this huge amount of work to build these value chain linkages? I thought when I started this that this must be something that's available. We looked at the different kinds of publicly available data sets from the OECD, from different statistics centers around the world. I was like, this is bound to be information that somebody else needs as well. The net impact use case cannot be the first reason why this is built. And I wanted to buy this data somewhere, and we could not find it. And still 5 years later, I haven't found this data anywhere else. Why do we need to build it? It's because in 2022, it's not enough to just quantify the impacts that happen inside your own company. That these are like the 3 job safety things that happened. These are our emissions inside our headquarters here in Vantaa or something like that. But companies' impacts happen in very complex value chains. To give you an example that I often use is when it comes to industries that we're used to thinking actually like dirty and bad, like mining, for example. And then we're used to thinking that many companies that do nice little gadgets and are digital, so to say, are then completely like good citizens of the world. But these gadget companies, I use Apple a lot, so let's use it again. Apple could not make this laptop here on this table next to me if it wasn't for the global mining industry. So we need to start to understand how these companies are interlinked and how these industries are interlinked. And we need to start to bear the responsibility of also things that happen outside our company. It could even be said that the largest impacts that your company have do not happen inside your company or inside properties or physical or immaterial things that you own, but they happen somewhere else. It's about what you enable, what activities you actually support and add in the world. The second piece of work that goes into a second thing we need is basically then for each and every one of these products that have been outlined in the huge product graph, we do a science-based comparable impact modeling. We use the world's largest open access database for scientific articles called the Core, and quite a big list nowadays of other publicly available scientific data. What is the word? Databases. Yeah, that was the one I was looking for. What this basically leads us to is net impact profiles for all the products and services that can be traded in the global markets. Thirdly, what we need is a mapping of the companies to the product graph. And this is another question where I was absolutely certain that this cannot be the first use case, or not the first use case, but there has to be good enough granular data where I could access that I would get any company and a listing of its products, not by the brand names, that is very easy to generate, but by what the products actually are. So for example, a sugar-sweetened soft drink packaged in a recyclable aluminum can. Well, turns out this doesn't exist either. So this is what we've been spending a lot of time lately, and this is something where we're now really good at. And I don't actually know any other database that would have more granular information about the products and services of companies than Upright Database today, which is a good thing because it allows us to do a lot of things that we're going to show you in just a few minutes. And finally, even though I was talking that the disclosures are not enough, they are still really good to have and to know, to sanity check, find outliers like this, like we just saw, and also to complement many of the data points that we have. Great. This is a lot about how the model actually works and what Upright has been up to in the past couple of years. But why are we here today? So what is the new platform about? We're about to show you the platform soon, but maybe first just to share with you the vision and the aim behind it, why we decided to start doing something like this, to build the world's first open access impact data platform where anyone can go. This was my very concrete aim if I needed to put it in one sentence. I want anyone to be able to go online, type in their browser, impact Nokia, impact Spotify, and find a profile that is, first of all, based on science, comparable, and that you can find other companies in the same format, that you wouldn't have to read these reports with more than 200 pages and then try to decide how many maybe handicaps there were and what can you rely on this time. We set very concrete decision criteria, being the engineers that we are. We put our dream in pieces. So what needs to be in the new open access data platform that we're about to see today? First of all was to enable real comparability. It means simply that we show the same data points for all the companies. No cherry picking, which has been super popular for some reason that I don't really understand in the impact data scene in the past 10 or 20 years, has been that we put sub-industries in different categories and we say that, hey, if you make these shoes, these are the 2 things that you need to report on. If you make these lollipops, it's the 3 points here. How do you actually draw any sense-making conclusions if every companies and sub-companies are reporting on different things? It draws to really sub-optimized decisions, such as if you only then choose the, let's say, the best performing 30%, you end up with faulty conclusions such as the best performing 30% of tobacco companies should be invested in as much as the best performing 30% of, let's say, medtech companies. That makes no sense. So we need to look at the same data points for all companies in the same format. And we wanted to, of course, put them under the same roof as well. We want to show all the relevant lenses of impact side by side, organized as net impact profiles. So we don't want to waste time on discussing whether the EU taxonomy makes sense or not. Let's just show what the data shows and let the viewer decide if that makes sense or not. Let's show the EU sustainable finance disclosure regulation PI indicators. Let's show the UN SDG alignment data. Let's show what the companies themselves are saying, and let's show the Upright net impact quantification. And let the viewer see for themselves what these data points are bringing forth. Thirdly, we wanted to integrate the perspectives of companies and outside-in data. And this is a really important reason why we're here today. we saw many great companies putting a lot of work into really measuring their impact as well as possible. Working with us, not working with us, but working with some other data providers like us, but really wanting to depict their impact well. But at the same time, there were still a lot of mismatches between what's being spoken and what the science-based impact models say that are the most relevant impacts. So bringing these lenses together, let companies have their own say, comment on the data, show what they have been measuring themselves, and once again, let the viewer decide what they want to use. Finally, we put a pretty big challenge on our own operating model and our own business model, because we believe that this discussion is only changed when data like this is something that can be shared openly. It's not that just something that 3 people in a huge bank who happen to have a license for a huge American data provider can see. No data like that can change the world if it's something that cannot be seen, cannot be scrutinized by a large enough amount of people. So that's why we really put some thought into how can we operate in a way that we publish all the profiles that we work together with companies, and then what are the ways to make that happen and make that openly accessible for everyone. And a final requirement that we made for ourselves is that anyone needs to have a chance to comment on the data. Our model is far from perfect. We want feedback all the time. The company's data is far from perfect, as we saw. Everybody needs to have a chance to comment, and we need to have a clear discussion structured in one place. Cool. So what this then has led up to is the world's first open access impact data platform.